Hi, I'm Nick Cross, the GM of Sales and Marketing at Comex, and we're Australia's leading end-user compute and digital workspaces partner to many of the world's leading VDI and DAS vendors, including Citrix, Parallels, Microsoft AVD and Nerdio. And we also include our ecosystem vendors, Igel and 2Steps. And I'm excited to be joined today by my friend Brian Riegels-Morgan, an end-user compute consultant and Igel specialist at Incentra. We're both excited to be traveling to the Igel Disrupt conference in Miami, and today we'll be sharing a little bit about why Igel should be a consideration to all organizations. But with the noise and disruption we're seeing by the vendors in the market with price increases and program changes, we wanted to provide a different way of considering the real value in your vendor application delivery strategy by reframing the narrative in a constructive way and evangelize why Igel really offers an exciting and different approach that's bringing value to organizations globally. And here at Comex, we want to shout about them more.
So a question I'd like to ask you is, what does Kurt Cobain, World War II and the moon have in common with the Windows 10 end-of-life date?
One of the biggest musical shifts in the last decades of music came from Nirvana. The band were largely responsible for bringing grunge music to the masses. What Nirvana did was turn the convention upside down. Whereas many mainstream bands were spending millions on productions and sung about sex, drugs, and objectifying women in particular, Kurt Cobain was pro-feminist, anti-authoritarian, and he wrote about his feelings. Now, without giving away my age, as a young boy growing up in the UK, it was nothing short of life-changing. They changed the status quo. Nevermind became Nirvana's magnum opus. Great art breaks the previous rules. It's an inversion of what came before, and they took the accepted route to success and turned it on its head and thought differently about the problem. Now, the mental model of inversion posits that we should look to solve a problem from the opposite point of view. And instead of focusing on success, we should focus on preventing failure by asking questions like, how can we fail? Another example of inversion was during World War II. Military analysts were trying to figure out how to armour their planes better, and they noticed that many returning aircraft had bullet holes in the wings, tail and fuselage. And the immediate assumption was to reinforce these areas, and it sounds pretty logical, right? But a US-based statistician named Abraham Wald made an observation. These were the planes that had survived. The planes that didn't return might have been hit in other vital areas like the engine. And by focusing only on the survivors, they were missing crucial information. Now, Wald's insight was to reinforce the areas with no bullet holes on the returning planes. And why was that? Well, he realised that the planes hit in those parts did not return. So rather than focusing on achieving success, inversion encourages you to consider avoiding failure. Now, inversion allows us to reframe any problem. An example you may discuss of your IT environment is, how do we want to increase collaboration? Well, that's the wrong question. What we should be doing is, how do we hinder or prevent collaboration? Maybe we would make sure that Teams and Zoom doesn't work properly all of the time, or really just add a complex file storage system. Now, if you want a project you're working on to succeed, ask before your project starts. What might go wrong or prevent this project from succeeding? What if we consider the personal side of things? How do we want to get a promotion? Maybe we should actually be better asking, what's the best way for me to stay where I am? Now, to our problem. I believe the world of end-user compute is unique. In the whole IT industry, I genuinely believe we've got the responsibility and the power to affect how users work. We're all providing services in one way or another to organizations. But what we actually mean is to people. Real people. Real people who come to work, do their jobs and want to get home to their families. Now, you know, we all use slides like this that evangelizes the dream of what the world we work is like, but the reality is very different. When we're faced with an ever-changing landscape and multiple deployment options, different virtualization providers, do you do SaaS or do you do something different? How do you remediate, manage and deploy? How do you increase your security posture? How do you protect your organization's data? The challenges we face and indeed the options available to us today are complex. And in amongst this complexity, we're at risk of forgetting the end user, that person, just trying to do their job. So in our little bubble of end user compute, let us apply inversion and ask the question, how do we provide a poor endpoint user experience? To provide a really poor end user experience, we should make it as large as possible and require a really fast processor and lots of RAM. And also, why don't we throw in some really big chunky hard drives? That would be a good idea, wouldn't it? We'll make sure that this is all really expensive, and meaning that those organizations who can't justify spending on the latest and greatest will have to allow their users to run slow systems. But eventually, we'll force them to part with their money by enforcing something in the operating system, maybe. Well, what we can then do is make the operating system open. Let's make it a popular attack vector for hackers. We'll let users install whatever they like. Maybe we even put adverts in there as well. Numerous notifications, things that distract them along the way. Now, what if we'll ensure that the only way to protect users is by installing more agents, and we'll then make sure that there is a complex system to manage and lots of configuration that we need to do. But we'll offer newer versions at some point that on the face of it makes it easier to manage for us, but we'll know in reality it isn't. And we'll start forgetting about what real end users want, which is simplicity. Now, let's make that desktop experience complex. We'll make sure everything provides a notification, and we'll make sure that there's lots of distractions like the weather, news, and hey, let's put a little advert in there as well. Let's drop a few annoying things that just disrupt the way people work. Sounds familiar, right? Now, what we can also do is to make sure that we change it every now and then. We'll install lots of apps, some the users actually need and others that are totally unrelated to their job. But of course, we can also make the user experience of the admin worse by having complex and confusing policies and tools to lock this down. Now, this actually gives us all a double whammy, as then the users will complain that their system at home is better than the one at work, and we can then leave IT to explain why. Great. Well, what we then realise is that there is a better way to deliver this experience, and we'll be spending a lot of money on virtualising it. But then to give access to our users, we'll deploy it again to the endpoint. It's genius, right? This sounds fantastic. Now, we can then make all the management of all the stuff we've installed on the endpoint really complicated, where every single component needs its own management solution, which in turn needs designing, implementing and managing and updating. Now, you get the picture here. So, using the mental model of inversion, if we avoid all of these things, what we'll surely end up with is a great user experience, right? Now, before we get on to that part, there's one thing still to consider. Our friends at Microsoft, what's the Windows 10 end-of-life opportunity?
So thanks, Nick. The Windows 10 opportunity that's coming up, there's a number of key aspects around that. So I spend a lot of my life in advisory where I talk through the critical events that are happening in EUC with customers. And I talk to the partners, the customers, the vendors, a whole heap of people within your business. And there's a number of items that are the same conversation across the board with all of the businesses that we touch. Endpoint security. Nick's already mentioned Windows 10 end of life. We're coming up with a load of security aspects that are going to be impacted by that. Ease of management, making a really complex end user endpoint solution doesn't rely to an ease of management service. That impacts the employee experience. And then there's other additional effects that are going to be impacting everything that comes through as a whole in your business that you need to be looking at addressing. There's a number of security items around securing VDI, the support calls, the performance of these things. Again, agents go on. Everything gets put together to be able to monitor, maintain, and deliver your service to your users. And the difficulty with that is, the more complex that is, the harder it is to keep your management across that. With the next piece that you'll see on these slides, we've put together some of the critical EUC events that are coming up in the next 18 months. If you do not know about these and you're not doing something to address these, you're going to have massive impacts across your whole organization. We saw it in December last year with companies scrambling to address an end-of-life event for physical NetScaler devices that then ran critical services on systems that were not in support. There's new versions of Teams coming out. There's a Teams VDI support critical event date, which is 30th of June, where classic Teams is going to no longer be supported in VDI. So you have to be moved off that platform. To move off that platform, you have to be on a new version of software. There's a whole heap of these systems coming through where if you're not aligned to delivering the services now to get to that outcome, you're going to be pushed into an environment where you're no longer supported, or you're going to have the security risks, or you're going to do it in a very fast way, which a lot of businesses end up completing and then spend the next 3 years tidying up the mess that doing it at a fast rate is. With all of these critical events in EUC that are coming around, the big one is going to be Windows 10 end of product support, October 14, 25. There's also the end of M365 apps on Windows Server 2019 and 2016, October 25. So we need to be looking at what can we do around those endpoints now to ensure that we are delivering a better experience to the users with less risk, with less management overhead, and actually being in a position where when we hit October next year, you're going to not have to worry about the services that you're delivering being impacted by security events or legacy look, feel, that type of thing. And the knock-on of that as well is going to be there's post October the 14th, Microsoft are going to be more than happy to take your money to extend the life of the security patching for Windows 10. They've done it with all the other products that go out there. The current advisory with the extended security update license is $61 per device per year. And that's going to double every year for 3 years. So by the time you've continued to run Windows 10 for another 3 years, because it's just easier to do that, you're going to have spent thousands of dollars keeping on the same platform and still be in the same situation you are before you actually do something about the environment.
What's the Windows 10 end-of-life opportunity? Well, Canada say by the end of Windows 10 support, there could be up to 240 million PCs that can go into e-waste. Now, look, let me help you with the visualization of that number, because that sounds like a lot. But if we stack each of these PCs or laptops on top of each other, they would be the height of the moon and reach a further 600 kilometers into space. So we've got a problem we need to look at resolving as a team here. What if we looked at repurposing or renewing the endpoints? What could the inversion outcome be? What if there was a way of providing the applications a user needs simply on their endpoint device using your existing investment in Citrix, VMware, Nerdio, etc.? What if there was a way to extend the life cycle of your existing endpoints and not need to spend a huge amount to replace fleets of endpoints, but to really maximize the value in your DAS VDI investment to better effect? But what if you didn't have DAS or VDI? What if you're only delivering web or SaaS apps, but you're not considering the endpoint as a secure edge device as it's all safe in the cloud? Scenario is this. Right now, there's high capex, high performance, costs going in around processing and storage, 3 to 5 year replacement cycles, high software cost, security endpoint agents, endpoint management agents, really high OPEX costs that go along with the testing, the patching, the management and monitoring of those environments. We've got a broken security model that looks at the monitoring, detection and remediation. We could all introduce what Igel call a preventative security model. That is a smaller endpoint operating system footprint, doesn't require the latest and greatest i7, i9 processors to run the work. It's a read-only operating system with no local user data, so it's not an attack surface. We provide trusted applications that are trusted in-chain from boot, and where everything is encrypted and only what your end users need is actually deployed to them. And all of this can be managed from a single console where malware on the attack surface on Linux is tiny, eliminating Windows antivirus bloating devices. And remember, Citrix or your others environments, they're only as secure as the device in which you're actually running them on. So, my friends, the strategy needs to evolve. And I want you to challenge your thinking about what we do. Now, it's not about being disruptive for disruptive's sake. It's about reframing the issues we have in end-user computing and allowing ourselves to consider alternative strategies that move us away from doing what we've always done, and maybe we need to all be a little bit more like Nirvana. We do hope that this overview of the impending Windows 10 end of life actually is seen as an opportunity on some examples on what you can actually do in order to best prepare yourself as an organization. If you're interested in more details, feel free to get in contact with the Comic sales team. We'd be delighted to help you.